All right, let's talk about the price of a side effect. Today, we're going to dig into the hidden economics behind things that don't seem to have a price tag, like pollution or maybe even a public park. We're talking about externalities and public goods.
So think about this for a second. Have you ever wondered why some things seem to come with a hidden cost that nobody's paying for? Or, the opposite, a surprise benefit that you get totally for free.
For instance, picture a factory. Now, it pays for its labor, it pays for its materials, sure. But what about all that gunk it's pumping into the river? That pollution is wrecking a local fishery downstream. That's a very real cost, but it never, ever shows up on the factory's balance sheet.
Now let's flip it. Imagine a beekeeper just trying to make some honey. Well, their bees don't exactly respect property lines. They fly over to a neighbor's orchard and end up pollinating all the crops, which means a much better harvest for the farmer. And the farmer gets all that value for nothing.
So you've got this hidden cost from pollution and this free benefit from pollination. In economics, both of these are classic examples of what are called market failures. And trust me, once you get your head around this idea, you start seeing the hidden logic behind so much of our world, from environmental rules to why we have public parks in the first place.
So let's dive into our first section, when the invisible hand fumbles.
In a perfect textbook world, the invisible hand of the market is supposed to guide everything perfectly. The idea is that competition leads to the absolute best, most efficient results for everybody. But the real world is messy, right? It's full of what economists call missing markets. I mean, think about it. You can't just go to the store and buy a bottle of clean air or pay a fee for pollination services. And when there's no market for something, its price is effectively zero.
And that idea of a missing price tag leads us straight into our second section, where we're going to look at these unpriced side effects, better known as externalities.
So what exactly is an externality? Well, it's any time one person's actions have an impact on someone else's well-being or business. But, and this is the absolute key, that impact isn't reflected in any price. No money changes hands for the harm or for the help.
This chart really gets to the core of it. Over on the left, you've got the factory's private cost. That's the stuff it pays for. Labor, materials, the usual. But on the right, you see the social cost, which is everything the factory pays for, plus the cost of the environmental damage. The problem is, the factory only sees that left column, so it ends up producing way more pollution than is good for society as a whole.
Okay, so if the whole problem is a missing price tag, the solution seems kind of obvious, doesn't it? Let's figure out how to actually put a price on these side effects.
The most famous solution for this is called a Pigouvian tax. It's really a simple three-step dance. First, you identify the negative side effect, the pollution. Second, you calculate the cost of the damage it's causing. And third, you apply a tax that's equal to that cost. This basically forces the polluter to internalize that external cost, to make it part of their business calculation.
And hey, this logic works in reverse too. For the good side effects, instead of a tax, you can use a subsidy. You can actually pay people for doing things that benefit everyone, like giving a farmer a subsidy to use practices that help keep the local river clean.
But it's not always about taxes and subsidies from the government. There's this other fascinating idea called the Coase theorem. It basically says that if you just clearly define who owns what, like maybe the fishery owns the right to clean water, and if it's easy for people to negotiate, they can often just bargain their way to an efficient solution all by themselves. No government required.
Yeah, but you knew there was a catch, right? In the real world, those ifs are a huge deal. Negotiating isn't free. It takes time and money. And imagine trying to get thousands of people affected by air pollution to all bargain together. It's a logistical nightmare. And not everyone has the same information. So while the Coase theorem is a brilliant idea, it's not always so practical. All right, let's switch gears a bit. We've been talking about side effects, but now let's tackle another huge category of market failure. In Section 4, we're looking at goods for everyone, otherwise known as public goods.
Now, when an economist says public good, they don't just mean anything the government pays for. It's a very precise definition. To be a true public good, something has to have two special properties. It has to be non-rival and non-excludable.
So let's unpack that. Non-rivalry means that my using the good doesn't use it up for you. Think about a flood dam. The fact that I'm being protected doesn't reduce your protection one bit. And non-excludability means you literally can't stop people from benefiting, even if they don't pay. I mean, how could you possibly exclude one house on a street from the protection of national defense? Now,
These two qualities together create a massive problem for any private market. And that brings us right to Section 5, solving the free rider problem.
Here's the issue in a nutshell. If you can't be excluded from getting the benefit, why would you ever volunteer to pay for it? It makes perfect rational sense to just let everyone else foot the bill, and you, well, you get a free ride. That's the free rider problem, and it's precisely why the private market will almost always produce too few public goods, like clean air or national security.
So, how do we decide if we should provide a public good? Well, it takes a totally different way of thinking. For a private good, like a pair of shoes, the math is simple. It gets made if your personal benefit is more than the cost. But for a public good, like a lighthouse, you have to ask a different question. You have to ask if the sum of everyone's benefit is greater than the cost. It's a group calculation.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together now and take a look at the full economic picture. And look, this isn't just theory. These concepts are the bedrock of so many real-world policies. When you hear about Pigouvian taxes on fertilizer runoff, or carbon credit markets, or tradable permits for pollution, these are all attempts to put these economic ideas into action, to fix externalities and provide public goods.
So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. We call them market failures, but are they really failures of the market? Or are they just an invitation for us to think more intelligently and more broadly about how we define value? Maybe they're just pointing out that we need to create systems that properly account for things like clean air, a stable climate, and public safety. Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.